So the video today is on Buddhism and postmodernism, and I wanted to do a video comparing the two because some of the things I've been saying, this idea of the thinking mind creating things, can feel very postmodern. And so when I lecture about postmodernism, one of the first things I do is try to define it. And that's where we get into an interesting start, because part of the definition of postmodernism is that nothing can be defined. So when you go to define it, you're like, well, it's impossible. Anything you could define it as isn't it. And there's a way in which that can feel a little like some of the Zen riddles that you might have heard. So I can understand how people might think the two have a lot in common. But what I want to show in this video is that actually that's just the exact opposite. In fact, they have very little, if anything, in common. So to start, one of the fundamentals of postmodernism is that there is no objective reality. So in modernism, there was a kind of lifeline to reality. Our thoughts were not really, perfect reflections of reality, but they weren't imperfect. They weren't like completely flawed either. And so there's a little bit of a lifeline to whatever the objective world is. In postmodernism, that is completely severed. There is no connection with the objective world because there is no objective world to connect with. And so what you see is it's almost as if the thinking mind had become so godlike, so all-powerful, so all-important, that it assumed that it was no longer a reflection of reality, that it was actual reality itself. So just to give you a feel for this, I'll read a definition here. There are no hard distinctions between what is real and what is unreal, nor between what is true and what is false. So that's a quote from a postmodernist. And it gives you a feel for, that sever, what happens when you sever that connection. Reality is up for grabs. Reality is whatever I think it to be. And that becomes really a difficult thing when you get so many different versions of reality. If you assume that your thoughts define reality, what do you do when you talk to someone who has a different reality? It makes it sort of challenging. But I want to also show you that this is not at all consistent with Buddhism. For the Buddhist, and there's a drawing from a number of different sources here, but it's pretty clear that it's raining or not raining outside, regardless if I think it's raining or if I don't think it's raining. It really, either it is or it isn't outside. It's independent of my thoughts. So in Buddhism, you really see this pointing to an objective reality. In fact, many of the Buddhist stories are centered around not mistaking our symbols for reality itself. And so they will say, again, the image of the moon in the water's reflection isn't the moon. A finger pointing to the moon isn't the moon. And so again and again, they will refer to actual reality instead of you thinking about reality. And that's why these are so different. In Buddhism, you really take the mind's the mind's construct of reality, and you begin to become the observer of this construct. And once you begin to observe it, you realize, well, that's just the thinking mind's perspective. It's the moon's image in the water, and you don't take it as seriously any longer. But it's pointing to something. Now, the second really important quality of postmodernism is that, okay, reality is up for grabs. It's whatever I think it is, which puts the thinking mind in the highest position of authority. And Buddhism, particularly Zen, does the exact opposite. It puts the mind in its, I almost would say proper position as one way to experience reality, but not the only way. But language is so fundamental to postmodernists because language is the way you're doing the construction of reality, which is, again, very interesting because this is all so many left brain qualities when it comes to postmodernism. And I did a video on this a long time ago, that the language centers are in the left brain. And in fact, Ian McGilchrist has a very interesting take on postmodernism. I share with you the short version. And his idea, well, it's not his idea, but people have not long known that the left brain is far more comfortable with the idea of certitude and being certain and being right, and the right brain is far more exploratory and comfortable with the uncertain. So, but his idea is that maybe what's happening here is that the left brain has taken its authority as knowing that it's certain, but it borrowed the idea or stole the idea from the right brain that the world is uncertain, but then it connected the two in a very interesting way where it said the only thing I can be certain of is that there is nothing to be certain of. And so again, that sounds a little bit, like Zen-like or postmodernist, but again, they're really quite different. So again, let me get to the language here. So this is Derrida, famous French postmodernist. There's nothing outside the text. So there's nothing outside of language, the written word. Here's another quote. I always dream of a pen that would be a syringe. That's maybe my favorite because it just talks about how words are transmit thoughts, and it's almost like if I can use the right words, I'm like injecting these thoughts into your mind. But I think the last one, I think Derrida puts it probably the most honestly. I love language as I love life itself. So you get all this about how absolutely supreme and that language is the creator of reality. It is life itself. Now, to contrast this, I'm going to use a well-known Zen master, and there's many places in this short lecture I could focus on, but I'm going to focus right on the ending because you're going to sum up any talk. Even in the past, you'd sum up your best stuff right at the ending. And so here's the quote, and this is an exclamation. So it's words, words. The way is beyond language, for in it there is no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. Well, that is about as that's about as clear as one can get. That language and the thinking mind take us into a place that isn't real at all. They don't construct reality; they obscure reality. And when you get into practices, you can see how so many, because you could argue, you could say, okay, I followed you so far, and yes, maybe postmodernism cuts us off from the real world, and we're completely, lost in abstractions. What's so bad about that? Remember, so many of the videos I do, the books, everything seems to be centered around. There is a problem with abstractions. Bring problems with them, and they bring suffering, and they bring fears, and they bring worries. And so you can easily think of some time, maybe just even the last day or two, when you've really worried about something and it never turned out. So that abstraction that you constructed, that's virtual, construct of reality that was just an idea of what you thought might happen, and you worried and worried about it, and it never did. And that's why so many, like grounding, I always I've talked about this in other videos, that if you're having a panic attack and because you're lost in the abstract and you need to connect, you need to reconnect with actual reality. So the therapy just has you focus on 5 things you can see, and then you literally look out in your world, and a lamp and a cup and a book, and you literally connect with the real world rather than your thoughts about it. And then you move to what you can hear, and then what you can taste, or what you can smell. And so it all connects with the senses. And the more you connect with the senses, the less the more you're taking your consciousness and channeling it into reality rather than your thoughts about reality. In fact, that's what the entire mindfulness movement is completely centered on. Not thinking about reality. And that's the Zen idea of you cut wood or peel potatoes, and when you're doing this, you're cutting wood and peeling potatoes. I mean, that's what Zen is. It's to be in this reality as close as we can. And so the point, again, is that there are a couple ways in which Zen Buddhism or Buddhism in general might sound very much like postmodernism, but I really think they're quite different, and I think that postmodernism represents the pinnacle of the thinking mind, I think I said this in another video, the thinking mind on steroids. So how are we going to, do we want to turn this around? Well, again, abstractions tend to cause so much suffering that so it may be a good way to reconnect. And so just a couple things that might help us. The recognition of what is real. You know, when people ask the question, who am I? You know, it's a different way of putting it. You know, but they're really the same question. You know, we say, what is real? Who am I? I mean, we're trying to get to something authentic. And one of the ways that we can do that is by recognizing that the thinking mind is doing its best job, you know, but sometimes it's kind of like a dog trying to figure out calculus. You know, reality is really complex, and our ancestors used more faculties than just thinking. And one of the things that the Zen practice does is it helps us go beyond just our mode of thought. And so when you meet someone, so we're at a very interesting time, and you might be finding yourself meeting, like in the real world, meeting people for the first time. There's all kinds of Zoom people I know that I haven't met in person yet. And it's a fascinating thing to meet someone for the first time because you can feel the thinking mind and all of its postmodernist categories. You know, it's going to put people in, you know, that second you meet them. You know, every single thing they say is going to put them into one box or another. And if that's what the thinking mind does, it puts reality into boxes. That's why the thinking mind creates what we think are the things in the world, including even other people. But one of the things you can practice is recognizing the other modes of existence, the sense of feeling, the sense of vibration, a sense of energy in another person. And in a way, that's the kind of soul connection that you kind of get when you go beyond the thinking mind. And so, again, to sum up, it's not so much that there isn't a real world. It's just that the real world is something that is beyond our thoughts about it. And thoughts can take us maybe a certain part of the way, but that's it. It's going to leave us, you know, short. And so, again, you really find the contrast here with postmodernism in the sense that because they severed the connections to reality, thoughts are reality. In the Zen path, you find really the opposite, where you're losing your thoughts about reality in order to connect with other modes of consciousness that also reflect reality. And so there isn't so much it's not so much that there isn't an external world. It's just it's more than what I think it is.